I had this really awkward conversation a few years ago. It was a Sunday morning. We were getting ready for transit, and we were doing rehearsal, sound check, so the room was really loud. This guy standing next to me, one of my friends, he asked me a question, so I leaned in and gave him my answer. And he paused for a second, then he turned and looked at me and said, "I'm not sure if anyone's ever told you this before, but your breath smells terrible." I thought a lot of things, but the only thing that I actually said was, "I'm sorry." And he leans in and says, "I said your breath smells terrible." And I'm like, "I heard you the first time. I'm sorry, meaning I'm sorry you have to smell it, not I'm sorry that I didn't hear you." It was so awkward. So I want to give out a breath mint to somebody. Maybe, you know what, let's do this. Sammer, we've close talked before. I got a feeling Jen and Gavin are gonna need that. There we go, just helping you with your humility. All right, so back to the story. So I retold this conversation several times over the next week. And the more I retold it, the more I really started to think, man, why in the world aren't other people telling me this? Because, I mean, right after that conversation with my friend, I turned, I was like, nothing smelled weird. I mean, it smelled normal. And so how many people are dying on the inside, close talking with me, that just aren't saying anything? And to make things even worse, what else am I doing that stinks that people aren't telling me about? Hold on. Let me rephrase that. I'm not talking about gas or bowel movements. I know I'm in student ministry. All right, what else is there going on in my life that I need to be aware of? I mean, surely there's something else with all of the relationships and responsibilities I have that I'm doing that step on people's toes, that annoy someone, that's driving a wedge in between a relationship, and I just have no idea about it. I don't know about you. I mean, maybe you hear this stuff all the time. But I'm not talking about complaints like, "You burnt the chicken again," or "Why can't you turn your socks right side out before you throw them in the dirty clothes hamper?" Right? Maybe those are suggestions in your home. I don't know. I would classify them as complaints. But I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the deeper stuff, the more important stuff. The way you react whenever you're upset, or the way you make your kids feel whenever they disappoint you, or the way that you talk about people whenever they're not around, or the tone that you use only with your spouse. You see, the hard part is we never smell our own bad breath. And if we can't even smell our own bad breath, how in the world are we gonna know the things that are driving us away from other people? How in the world are we gonna be able to tell those things? Because those are the things in our lives that would be good to know. Now, luckily for us, we happen to be in the middle of this series looking at the words of Solomon written in the book of Proverbs. And Solomon has something very specific, very practical to say whenever it comes to things that we might want to consider changing or things that we need to be aware of. Now, maybe you've read this before, but I want to look at it again with you. This is Proverbs 12:15. He starts out by saying, "The way of the fool is right in his own eyes." The way of the fool is right in his own eyes. You know, there's a reason for the way that we do the things that we do, because we think it's the right way. We think it's the best way. The way we interact with people, the way that we treat people, that's the reason that we do them, is we think it's the best way. Otherwise, we just wouldn't be doing it, right? We would pick a different way and do something else all together. But if Solomon would say we're foolish because we think that we're right, I don't think we want to be foolish. I think we want to be wise. I think we want to know if our breath smells, both literally and figuratively. And fortunately, he continues this statement. He doesn't just stop and saying, "Hey, if you think your way is the best way, you're a fool." He continues and he says, "But a wise man listens to advice. The way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice." Solomon, he isn't saying we're foolish because we're wrong. He's saying we're foolish to assume that we're right. So the goal here isn't correcting a bad behavior. The goal here is to listen to advice. The goal here is to actively have people in your life that can give you advice, that can give you feedback when you need it, when it's difficult, when you're unsure. Now, I know what some of you guys are thinking. Same thing I thought. Well, I would be listening to advice. I'm the kind of person. But no one's giving me any advice. I'm not hearing anything. I don't know about those wedges that are being driven in between me and another relationship with someone. I'm just not aware of those things. Well, here's the thing. The best advice that you will get is the advice that's sought out. You will have to seek out the best advice in your life, because most people simply don't feel comfortable giving unsolicited advice, especially about the important things. Now, unless you're a mother-in-law, I think that's a God-given gift for you guys. I'm so sorry. My mother-in-law might be in here right now. I'm not talking about you, Linda. I promise. Please don't hold that against me. Mother-in-law jokes are easy sometimes. But Solomon says we're foolish if we don't listen to advice. And we can also say we're foolish if we don't seek advice. Listening and seeking, if we're not doing those things when it comes to advice, we're being foolish. We're being foolish. That's why it's so important that we have people in our lives that we can look to. We have people in our lives that we know, and that they don't have to be nice to us. You and I have to have people in our lives that you trust, and they don't have to be nice to you because they don't need you for anything, right? It's one thing asking my daughter for advice on how I'm doing as a dad, right before I give her allowance or I cook her a meal, or talking to your boss or your employees or your spouse. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying those people are bad to ask advice from, but it's so important that you and I have people in our lives that we trust and that just don't need us. They're not depending on us for something. They can be completely honest with us. That's so important. So once you have that person or those people, maybe you're even thinking of them right now, I want you to do one simple thing. Ask them one simple question. One of our pastors, Clay Scroggins, he has an incredible question whenever it comes to seeking advice. One of the best questions I've heard. So whenever you find this person, I want you to look him in the eyes and ask him Clay's question. It's this: if you were me, what would you do differently? If you were me, what would you do differently? And you can make it as general, as broad, or as specific as you want. It can be about parenting. It can be about marriage. It can be about your mother-in-law jokes, the relationships that you have with your coworkers. Whatever you want. But find that person, find those people, and look them in the eyes and say, be honest with me, be honest with me. If you were me, what would you do differently? Do you have someone in your life that you can do that with? I sure hope so, because all of us have bad breath in some area, maybe many areas, but we'll never know about it unless we have the right people in our lives that we can ask. And that will make our lives significantly better. That will make us wise and not foolish, which is really good to know.